Jiho Kim wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stepped out of his small research ship. The red sand of planet Valara crunched under his boots, and the twin suns made everything look orange and strange. He had been studying old alien buildings for 3 years now, but this was his first time visiting a living alien world. His hands shook a little as he adjusted his translator device. The Valaran buildings looked like they were made of smooth white stone that seemed to glow from the inside. Tall, thin aliens with pale blue skin walked around in flowing robes. They moved so gracefully that Jiho felt clumsy just watching them. He had spent months learning about their culture from old books and videos, but being here in person felt completely different. Ambassador Talon, a Velaran diplomat with kind silver eyes, greeted him at the spaceport. "Welcome, human friend. Tonight you will meet our royal family. It is a great honor." Jiho nodded nervously. He knew this meeting could help him get permission to study the ancient ruins he had traveled so far to see. That evening, Jiho stood in the Grand Palace Hall. The ceiling was so high he could barely see it, and crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light everywhere. Hundreds of Velarans in fancy clothes talked quietly among themselves. Their voices sounded like music to Jiho's ears. He felt very out of place in his simple black suit. When the royal family entered, everyone went quiet. The emperor was tall and impressive, wearing a crown that looked like it was made of starlight. Behind him walked Princess Nari. Jiho's breath caught in his throat. She was beautiful, with long silver hair and the same pale blue skin as the others. But what caught his attention were the metal braces on her legs that helped her walk. She moved slowly but with great dignity. Ambassador Talon whispered to Jiho, "Now you must greet the princess properly. Show respect, as I taught you." Jiho's mind went blank. He remembered something about putting his hand somewhere and bowing, but the exact details escaped him. His heart was beating so fast he could hear it. As Princess Nari approached him, Jiho panicked. He quickly placed his right hand over his heart, like he had seen in one of the cultural videos, and gave a deep bow. It seemed right to him. It felt respectful and formal. But something was wrong, very wrong. The entire hall went dead silent. Every single Valaran stared at him with wide eyes. Some covered their mouths in shock. Others stepped backward, as if they had seen something terrible. Ambassador Talon's face went completely white. Princess Nari stopped walking. Her silver eyes were huge with surprise, and her hands trembled. She looked at Jiho, then at her father, the Emperor, then back at Jiho. The silence stretched on forever. Jiho could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. "What did I do wrong?" Jiho whispered to Ambassador Talon, but the diplomat seemed too shocked to speak. Then Princess Nari did something that made everything even more confusing. Tears started falling down her face, but she was smiling. Slowly, very slowly, she walked closer to Jiho. She reached out with one delicate hand and gently touched her forehead to his palm. The moment their skin touched, Jiho felt a strange tingling sensation run through his entire body. The princess spoke in her musical voice, "I accept your proposal, brave human." The hall erupted in celebration. Velaran started cheering and throwing flower petals in the air. Music began playing from somewhere, but Jiho just stood there, completely lost. Proposal? What proposal? He had only tried to say hello. The next morning, Jiho woke up in a guest room that was bigger than his entire apartment back on Earth. His head was spinning from everything that had happened the night before. The celebration had gone on for hours, with aliens congratulating him in a language he barely understood. Now in the quiet morning light, he needed answers. A soft knock came at his door. Princess Nari entered, moving carefully with her leg braces. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept much either. In the daylight, Jiho could see how worried she really was. Her silver eyes had dark circles under them. "We need to talk," she said, quietly, sitting down in a chair across from him. Her voice was sad and heavy. "You don't understand what happened last night, do you?" Jiho shook his head. "I was just trying to be polite. I thought I was saying hello." Nari took a deep breath. "What you did is called the sacred promise. It's our most serious marriage ritual. When someone puts their hand over their heart and bows like that, They're asking someone to be their life partner forever. But I didn't know that, Jiho said, jumping up from his bed. It was an accident. I know, Nari said softly, but it doesn't matter now. When I touched your hand to my forehead, I accepted your promise. Our souls are connected now. It cannot be undone. Jiho felt his stomach drop. What do you mean it can't be undone? Nari looked down at her hands. If we try to break this bond, we will both die. It's not just a rule or a tradition. It's something that happens to our bodies. The connection between us is real now. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Jiho could hear his heart beating fast again. He thought about his research, his life back on Earth, his freedom. All of it seemed to slip away like sand through his fingers. I'm sorry, Nari whispered. I should have stopped you, but it happened. So fast. I know you must hate being trapped like this, especially with someone like me. She touched one of her leg braces sadly. Jiho really looked at her for the first time. She was trying so hard to be strong, but he could see how much pain she was in. Not physical pain, but the kind that comes from thinking nobody could ever truly want you. I don't hate you, Jiho said quietly. And I'm not trapped. Nari looked up at him in surprise. What? If this bond can't be broken, then we need to make the best of it, Jiho said, sitting down near her. I came here to learn about your people anyway. Now I'll just learn about them as part of the family. You're not angry, Nari asked, her eyes wide. I'm confused and scared, Jiho admitted, but angry. No, this isn't your fault any more than it's mine. For the first time since he'd met her, Princess Nari smiled, a real smile. It lit up her whole face. But their conversation was interrupted by voices in the hallway outside. Jiho could hear several. Velaran's talking in harsh, angry tones. Even though he couldn't understand all the words, he could tell they were upset about something. What are they saying? He asked. Nari's smile faded. They're saying that a primitive human has tricked their way into the royal family. They're saying you planned this to gain power. Her voice got quieter. They're saying I was foolish to accept a proposal from someone who doesn't even know our ways. Jiho felt anger rise in his chest. Not at being called primitive, but at hearing the pain in Nari's voice. Then I guess I better learn your ways fast, he said firmly. I won't let them say you made a mistake. Over the next few weeks, Jiho threw himself into learning everything he could about Velaran culture. He spent his mornings in the palace library, struggling through ancient texts with the help of his translator. The afternoons were for language lessons, with patient tutors who corrected his terrible pronunciation. But the best part of each day was the evening walks he took with Princess Nari through the palace gardens. At first, these walks were awkward and quiet. Nari would point out different plants and explain their uses, while Jiho asked basic questions about Velaran customs. But slowly, as the days passed, their conversations became more natural and interesting. One evening, as they sat by a fountain that sparkled with bioluminescent water, Jiho noticed Nari adjusting something on her leg braces. She had been doing this a lot lately, and he could see it was bothering her. Are they uncomfortable? He asked gently. Nari looked surprised that he had noticed. A little. The left one has been making a clicking sound for 3 days now. I need to fix it tonight. You fix them yourself? Jiho asked. Of course, Nari said as if it was obvious. I designed them myself. Who else would know how they work? Jiho stared at her. You designed those? But they're incredible. The way they move with your muscles, how smooth and quiet they are. That's some serious engineering. For the first time since he'd known her, Nari looked proud instead of embarrassed. You really think so? Most people just see them as a sign of weakness. Are you kidding? Jiho said, getting excited. I've studied ancient technology for years, and I've never seen anything so advanced. How do they know when you want to move? How do they balance your weight so perfectly? Nari's eyes lit up. Well, there are sensors that read muscle tension, and the balance system uses gyroscopes connected to... She stopped suddenly, looking embarrassed again. Sorry, I get carried away talking about technical things. Most people find it boring. Boring? Jiho laughed. Nari, this is fascinating. Can you show me how they work? That night in Nari's private workshop, Jiho got his first real look at who Princess Nari really was. The room was filled with tools, blueprints, and half-finished inventions. She had been working on improvements to everything from water purification systems to transportation devices. Her leg braces were just one of dozens of things she had created. "I've always loved solving problems," Nari explained as she worked on her brace with tiny, precise tools. "When I was little, other children played with toys, but I took things apart to see how they worked." "What about the suitors your father mentioned?" Jiho asked. "Didn't any of them appreciate your inventions?" Nari's face darkened. "They never got to see this side of me. Most of them couldn't look past these," she tapped her braces, "long enough to have a real conversation. They would sit with me for exactly the required amount of time, make polite small talk about the weather, and then leave as quickly as possible." "That's their loss," Jiho said simply. Nari looked at him carefully. "Do you mean that, or are you just being kind?" "I mean it," Jiho said. "Back on Earth, I spend most of my time studying how ancient civilizations solved problems with limited technology. But you're solving problems with technology I can barely understand. You're not disabled, Nari. You're enhanced." Nari was quiet for a long moment. Then she said softly, "No one has ever said anything like that to me before." As the weeks went on, Jiho found himself looking forward to their time together more and more. He loved watching Nari's face light up when she explained a new invention. He admired how she never complained about the physical challenges she faced, but instead found creative ways around them. She had turned what others saw as a weakness into her greatest strength, and Nari, for her part, began to relax around Jiho. She started sharing her ideas and dreams with him. She showed him plans for cities that would be accessible to everyone, regardless of their physical abilities. She talked about her hopes for her people's future. "You know," Jiho said one evening as they watched the twin suns set, "I think I'm starting to understand why the universe brought us together." 3 weeks into his stay on Valara, Jiho was summoned to the throne room. The massive hall felt even more intimidating than it had on his first night. Emperor Kalen sat on his crystal throne, looking down at Jiho with unreadable silver eyes. Dozens of court nobles stood watching, their faces cold and unwelcoming. "Human." "Jiho," the emperor's voice echoed through the hall, "many of my people question whether you are worthy to marry my daughter. To prove yourself, you must complete the trial of 5 virtues. These tests have been used for 1,000 years to judge the character of those who would join our royal family." Jiho's mouth went dry. He glanced at Nari, who was standing beside her father's throne. She looked worried but gave him an encouraging nod. "What do these trials involve?" Jiho asked, trying to keep his voice steady. 5 tests, the emperor explained. Strength, speed, courage, wisdom, and compassion. You have 3 days to prepare. Failure means you will be sent back to your home world alone. That night, Nari found Jiho pacing nervously in the gardens. "You look terrified," she said gently. "I should be terrified," Jiho replied. "I'm not a warrior or an athlete. I spend my days digging in dirt and reading old books. How am I supposed to compete with your people in tests of strength and speed?" "Maybe you don't need to compete the way they expect," Nari said thoughtfully. "Tell me, how do humans solve problems differently than we do?" Jiho thought about it. "We're stubborn, I guess. When we can't do something the obvious way, we find another way, sometimes a completely crazy way." 3 days later, the trials began in the great arena. Hundreds of Valarans filled the stands to watch. The first test was strength. Jiho had to lift a massive stone block that weighed as much as a small car. He strained and struggled, his face turning red, but could barely move it an inch. The crowd murmured disappointingly. Then Jiho noticed something. The stone wasn't just sitting on the ground, it was resting on smaller stones. Instead of trying to lift the entire weight, he used a metal rod as a lever. By moving the smaller stones to create a fulcrum point, he was able to tip the massive block over. The crowd went silent with surprise. "Clever," Emperor Kalen admitted, "but unconventional." The speed trial was next. Jiho had to race across the arena faster than any Velaran had ever done. Their long legs and graceful movements made them natural runners. Jiho ran as hard as he could, but finished dead last, gasping for breath. But then came the courage test. He was led into a dark underground chamber where he had to face his greatest fear alone. The room filled with illusions, things that looked real but weren't. Most challengers saw monsters or dangerous animals, but Jiho's fear was different. He saw himself back on Earth, alone in his small apartment, having never taken any risks or met anyone like Nari. The illusions showed him a life of safety, but no real connection with others. "I choose the unknown," Jiho said out loud to the empty chamber. "I choose to be here even if it's scary." The illusions faded, and he walked out of the chamber with his head held high. The wisdom test surprised everyone. Jiho was presented with an ancient puzzle that had stumped Velaran scholars for centuries. It involved arranging crystal pieces to create a pattern that would unlock a hidden door. Previous challengers had tried to solve it using mathematical formulas and logical sequences, but Jiho approached it differently. He stepped back and looked at the whole puzzle instead of the individual pieces. "It's not about the pattern," he said suddenly. "It's about the story these crystals are telling." He arranged them not in a mathematical sequence, but in the order that told the story of Velara's creation myth. The door opened immediately. Even the hostile nobles began whispering with grudging respect. After the trials, Jiho found himself with more free time and a growing reputation among the Velaran people. Some still whispered about the strange human who solved problems in backwards ways, but now there was curiosity mixed with the suspicion. This gave him more opportunities to spend time with Nari, and their friendship began to bloom into something deeper. One afternoon, Nari invited him to her private laboratory, a place she had never shown to any of her previous suitors. The room was filled with gadgets and inventions that made Jiho's eyes go wide with wonder. Holographic displays showed complex diagrams floating in the air, and strange machines hummed quietly in the corners. "This is where I really live," Nari said, settling into a chair designed specifically for her needs. "My father thinks I just tinker with simple things, but I've been working on something that could change our entire world." She activated a large display that showed the blueprints for a city. But this wasn't just any city, it was designed for people with all kinds of different abilities. The buildings had ramps and lifts, the walkways adjusted their height automatically, and transportation moved at different speeds for different needs. "It's incredible," Jiho breathed, studying the plans. "But why haven't you shown this to your father?" Nari's face fell. "He thinks my ideas are too ambitious. He says I should focus on accepting my limitations, not trying to change the world around them." "That's crazy," Jiho said. "Back on Earth, we have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. Some of our greatest innovations came from people who refused to accept limitations." "Really?" Nari's eyes lit up. "Absolutely. Let me show you something." Jiho pulled out his datapad and showed her pictures of Earth cities. "See these ramps and special pathways? We built those because people like you demanded better access. And these voice-controlled systems? They were invented by someone who couldn't use their hands." Nari studied the images carefully. "Your people build things for everyone, not just the majority." "We're getting better at it," Jiho said honestly. "It took us a long time to learn, but we figured out that making things accessible for some people usually makes them better for everyone." From that day on, they began working together. Nari would show Jiho Velaran technology, explaining how energy crystals powered their cities and how their biotechnology grew buildings instead of constructing them. In return, Jiho shared human engineering concepts and problem-solving methods. "You think so differently," Nari said one evening as they worked on improving her leg braces. "When I see a problem, I try to find the perfect solution. But you look for the solution that's good enough and can be made quickly." "Sometimes good enough is better than perfect," Jiho replied, adjusting a small component. "Perfect solutions take forever to develop. Good enough solutions help people right now." Their collaboration didn't go unnoticed by the court. Some nobles whispered that Nari was being influenced by primitive human thinking. Others worried that their partnership was becoming too close too fast. One morning, Ambassador Talon approached Jiho with a concerned expression. "The court is talking," he said quietly. "Some believe you are taking advantage of the princess's situation." What situation? Jiho asked, confused. They think she's vulnerable because of her condition, and that you're using her loneliness to gain power in the royal family. Jiho felt anger rise in his chest. That's ridiculous. Nari is the strongest, smartest person I've ever met. If anyone's being influenced, it's me learning from her. But the gossip continued. During formal dinners, Jiho noticed how some nobles would stop talking when he approached. Others would make comments about humans being opportunistic and manipulative. The criticism hurt, but what bothered Jiho more was how it affected Nari. She began to doubt herself again, wondering if their connection was real or if she was just grateful for any attention. Maybe they're right, she said sadly one night as they watched the stars from her balcony. Maybe I'm just so desperate for someone to accept me that I'm imagining feelings that aren't there. Jiho took her hand gently. Nari, look at me. I didn't come to this planet looking for a wife or power or anything, except old ruins. But I found something better. I found someone who challenges me to think differently, who shows me new ways to see the world. That's not desperation, that's partnership. As he spoke, Nari realized something had changed in how she felt about him. This wasn't just gratitude or companionship anymore. She was falling in love with this strange human who saw her as she truly was. 2 months after the trials, as wedding preparations began in earnest, Jiho noticed something strange. Servants who had been friendly to him suddenly avoided eye contact. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms. Even Ambassador Talon seemed nervous and distracted during their daily meetings. The first real clue came by accident. Jiho was returning late from the library when he heard voices coming from a storage room near the kitchen. The door was slightly open, and he recognized the voice of Lord Vex, one of the noble council members who had always been cold toward him. The human cannot be allowed to marry into the royal family, Lord Vex was saying. It will pollute our bloodline and weaken our entire civilization. But how? Asked another voice. The sacred bond cannot be broken without killing both of them. Exactly, Lord Vex replied with a cruel laugh. An accident during the wedding ceremony. The human dies, the princess follows within hours, and we can claim it was a tragic mishap. Then Prince Kael can marry someone appropriate. Jiho's blood went cold. He pressed himself against the wall trying to hear more, but footsteps were approaching. He quickly slipped away, his heart pounding. That night he found Nari in her workshop, working late on wedding decorations that incorporated both human and Velaran traditions. She looked up with a smile when he entered, but her expression changed when she saw his worried face. What's wrong? She asked immediately. Jiho told her everything he had overheard. Nari's face went pale, then hard with anger. Lord Vex, she said grimly. I should have known. He's been pushing for his nephew Prince Kael to marry me for years, but I never thought he would go this far. What do we do? Jiho asked. Should we tell your father? Nari shook her head. We need proof. My father won't act against a noble house based on overheard conversations. We need to catch them in the act of planning this. Over the next week, they began their investigation. Nari used her access to the palace's surveillance systems to monitor the conspirators' movements, while Jiho used his outsider status to observe conversations that the nobles thought he couldn't understand. They made a perfect team. Nari's strategic mind mapped out the conspiracy's structure, identifying key players and their relationships. Jiho's human perspective helped him notice things that seemed normal to Velarans, but were actually suspicious. Look at this, Jiho said, one evening showing Nari a schedule he had copied. The kitchen staff is being changed for the wedding day. All the regular workers are being given time off and temporary staff are being brought in. That's not normal, Nari agreed. The regular staff has worked royal events for decades. Why would they be replaced? She cross-referenced the names of the temporary workers with her surveillance data. These people have all met with Lord Vex's associates in the past month. Their investigation revealed a network of at least 6 noble houses working together. The plan was elaborate and cruel. During the wedding feast, Jiho's food would be poisoned with a substance that would make him appear to choke. In the confusion, he would be given a medicine that would actually kill him instantly. The poison was designed to look like an allergic reaction to Velaran food. They've thought of everything, Nari said, studying their evidence. Even the doctor who would examine your body is part of the conspiracy. How do we stop them? Jiho asked. Nari's eyes gleamed with the same intensity she showed when solving engineering problems. We let them think their plan is working, but we turn it against them. That sounds dangerous, Jiho said. It is dangerous, Nari admitted. But if we just expose them now, they'll deny everything and try again later. We need to catch them in the act, with witnesses. They spent the next 3 days planning their counter-strategy. Nari's knowledge of palace security and Jiho's unpredictable human thinking created a plan that was both clever and risky. The key is making them believe. They're succeeding, Nari explained as they finalized their preparations. You'll appear to be poisoned, but you'll actually be taking a harmless substance I've created that mimics the symptoms. When they try to give you the real poison, we'll have them. And if something goes wrong? Jiho asked. Nari reached out and took his hand. Then we face it together. That's what partners do. As the wedding day approached, both of them felt the weight of what they were about to attempt. They were risking everything on a plan that required perfect timing and a lot of luck. But they had something the conspirators didn't expect. They had learned to trust each other completely. The night before their wedding, Jiho couldn't sleep. Tomorrow they would put their dangerous plan into action, and he might not survive if something went wrong. He found himself thinking about everything that had led to this moment, especially about Nari and how much she meant to him now. Unable to rest, he walked to Nari's workshop, hoping to find her awake too. The door was open, and soft light spilled into the hallway. Inside, he found Nari sitting at her workbench, but she wasn't building anything. Instead, she was looking at an old photograph. Can't sleep either, Jiho asked softly. Nari looked up, and he could see tears in her silver eyes. I keep thinking about tomorrow. What if our plan fails? What if you get hurt because of me? Hey, Jiho said, sitting down beside her. We're in this together, remember? Whatever happens, it's not your fault. Nari held up the photograph she had been studying. It showed a young Velaran girl running through a field, her legs strong and healthy. The girl was laughing, her arms spread wide like she was trying to fly. That's me, Nari said quietly. Before, Jiho looked at the photo more carefully. The girl did look like Nari, but something was different. Before what? Nari took a shaky breath. Before I chose this, she gestured to her leg braces. Jiho, I need to tell you something. Something I've never told anyone else. She stood up and walked to a locked cabinet. From inside, she pulled out a thick medical file covered in official seals. My condition isn't something I was born with. I did this to myself. Jiho stared at her, confused. What do you mean? When I turned 18, our scientists offered me a choice, Nari explained, her voice barely above a whisper. They had developed a genetic modification process that could enhance intelligence far beyond normal limits. But there was a cost. The process would damage the nerve pathways that control leg movement. Jiho felt his world shift. You chose to give up your ability to walk. Our planet was facing terrible problems, Nari continued. Climate disasters, resource shortages, political conflicts with neighboring worlds. My father was struggling to find solutions. The scientists said that with enhanced intelligence, I could help solve these problems and save millions of lives. She opened the medical file and showed him brain scans. Look at these, before and after the procedure. My cognitive abilities increased by over 300%. My pattern recognition, problem-solving skills, memory, everything became superhuman. Jiho studied the scans, his mind reeling. But you were just a teenager. How could you make such a huge decision? I wasn't really a teenager by human standards, Nari said. Velarans mature faster than humans, and I knew what I was choosing. I spent months researching the procedure, understanding the risks. What did your parents say? Nari's face darkened. My father begged me not to do it. He said he would rather lose his kingdom than watch his daughter sacrifice herself. But I convinced him that it was the only way to save our people. And it worked? Yes, Nari said simply. Within 2 years, I had solved the climate problems that were destroying our agriculture. I designed new energy systems that ended our resource shortages. I created diplomatic strategies that brought peace with our enemies. She looked down, had her hands. But I also became someone that no one could love. That's not true, Jiho said firmly. It is true, Nari insisted. Every man who ever courted me saw these braces and assumed I was weak or broken. They pitied me, or they ignored me, but none of them ever saw me as a whole person. Until you. Jiho reached out and took her hands. Nari, what you did was incredible. You sacrificed your own mobility to save your entire world. That's not weakness, that's the most heroic thing I've ever heard. You're not disgusted? Nari asked, tears flowing freely now. You don't think I'm selfish for choosing this and then complaining about being lonely? Disgusted, Jiho said, amazed. Nari, you're the bravest person I've ever met. You made an impossible choice to help others, knowing what it would cost you personally, and you've never once asked for recognition or praise for what you did. But I did complain, Nari said. I felt sorry for myself when suitors rejected me. I was jealous of other women who could walk and dance and attract partners easily. You're allowed to have feelings, Jiho said gently. Being a hero doesn't mean you stop being human, or Valaran. It just means you do the right thing even when it hurts. For the first time since she had started telling her story, Nari smiled. You really mean that, don't you? You're not just being kind. I mean every word, Jiho said. In fact, knowing this makes me love you even more. Not because I pity you, but because I'm amazed by your strength and intelligence and sacrifice. Nari looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of false kindness or hidden pity. But all she saw was genuine admiration and love. I was so afraid you would leave if you knew the truth, she whispered. Never, Jiho said, pulling her into his arms. Tomorrow we face whatever comes together. And after that, we'll build a future together. That's a promise. The wedding morning arrived with Valara's twin suns casting golden light across the palace. Hundreds of guests filled the great ceremonial hall, their colorful robes creating a sea of silk and jewels. Jiho stood at the altar wearing traditional Valaran wedding clothes that felt strange but beautiful. His heart was pounding, but not from wedding nerves, from knowing what was coming. Nari appeared at the far end of the hall, and even knowing the danger they faced, Jiho's breath caught. She looked stunning in a flowing white gown that had been specially designed to accommodate her leg braces. But Jiho knew those braces were different today. Nari had spent the last week secretly modifying them with hidden features that would surprise their enemies. The ceremony began with ancient Valaran traditions. Emperor Kalan spoke about the joining of two souls, while Jiho and Nari exchanged vows in both their languages. Everything seemed peaceful and normal, but Jiho could see the tension in Nari's eyes. She was watching the crowd carefully, looking for signs of the conspiracy. The moment came during the traditional wedding feast. As planned, servants brought out special dishes for the human guest. Jiho recognized the server, a man he had never seen before, one of the temporary workers they had identified. The man's hands shook slightly as he placed the poisoned food in front of Jiho. "Thank you," Jiho said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. He picked up his fork and took a large bite of the suspicious dish. Within seconds, he began to act out their plan. He clutched his throat and made choking sounds, pretending the fake poison Nari had given him earlier was taking effect. "Help!" Nari screamed, playing her part perfectly. "Something's wrong with my husband!" The hall erupted in chaos. Guests jumped to their feet, shouting in alarm, but Jiho watched carefully and saw Lord Vex pushing through the crowd with a small vial in his hand, the real poison disguised as medicine. "I have the antidote," Lord Vex announced loudly. "Quickly, we must give it to him." This was the moment they had been waiting for. As Lord Vex reached for Jiho's mouth with the deadly vial, Nari acted. Her modified leg braces suddenly extended, lifting her several feet into the air. Hidden panels opened, revealing small but powerful energy weapons. "Stop right there, Lord Vex," Nari commanded, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent hall. Lord Vex's face went white with shock. "Princess, what are you doing? Your husband is dying." "My husband is fine," Nari said calmly. "But you're about to be arrested for attempted murder." That's when the real fight began. Lord Vex dropped his disguise and signaled to his conspirators. Scattered throughout the crowd, 6 men in servant uniforms suddenly produced weapons and moved toward the royal family. But Jiho and Nari were ready. Jiho rolled off the table where he had been pretending to be poisoned and came up in a fighting stance that no Velaran had ever seen before. Human martial arts were completely unknown on this world, and his movements confused their attackers. When one man swung an energy blade at him, Jiho ducked low and swept the attacker's legs in a move he had learned in college self-defense classes. Meanwhile, Nari had become a one-woman defense system. Her leg braces allowed her to move in ways that seemed impossible, jumping and spinning with mechanical precision. The energy weapons in her braces fired stunning blasts that knocked attackers unconscious without killing them. She had designed them specifically for this fight. "Behind you!" Jiho shouted as another attacker approached Nari from her blind spot. She spun around and used her braces to create a protective shield, while Jiho tackled the man from the side. The fight was over in less than 2 minutes. All 6 attackers were unconscious or surrendering, and Lord Vex was trapped between Jiho and Nari with nowhere to run. The wedding guests stared in amazement at what they had just witnessed. "Guards!" Emperor Kalen called out, finally recovering from his shock. "Arrest these traitors!" As the conspirators were dragged away, Lord Vex shouted desperately, "This proves nothing. The human is corrupting our princess. Look how she fights now like a warrior instead of a lady." "She fights like a protector," Jiho said loudly, so everyone could hear. "She fights like someone who refuses to let innocent people be hurt. That's exactly the kind of person I want as my wife and partner." The crowd began to murmur with approval. They had seen something amazing today. Not just a fight, but a perfect partnership. Jiho and Nari had worked together like they could read each other's minds, each one covering the other's weaknesses. Emperor Kalen looked at his daughter with new respect. "Continue the ceremony," he announced. "These two have proven they can face any challenge together." 6 months after their dramatic wedding, Jiho stood on the balcony of their shared chambers, watching the morning light reflect off the crystal spires of Valara's capital city. The view never got old, but what amazed him more was how much had changed since that first confused night when he accidentally proposed to an alien princess. "You're up early again," Nari said, joining him on the balcony. Her morning routine had become easier since Jiho had helped her design new mobility aids that were lighter and more comfortable. She moved with confidence now, no longer trying to hide her braces but wearing them like the incredible technology they were. "I was thinking about the infrastructure project," Jiho said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "The engineers sent the latest reports yesterday. The new accessible transportation system is working even better than we hoped." Nari leaned back against him, her hand resting on her slightly rounded belly. "The ridership numbers are incredible. Even people who don't need accessibility features are using it because it's faster and more comfortable than the old system." This had become their new normal, working together to improve life for all Velarans. After the wedding day conspiracy was exposed, public opinion had shifted dramatically. The people saw how Jiho and Nari protected each other and the royal family, and they began to understand that the strange human prince wasn't trying to take anything from them. Instead, he was bringing new ideas that made everyone's life better. Their first major project had been redesigning the capital city's transportation network. Jiho's human engineering background, combined with Nari's advanced Velaran technology, had created something neither species could have achieved alone. The new system worked for people with all kinds of different physical abilities, and it was so efficient that neighboring planets were sending delegations to study it. "The delegation from Kepler-7 arrives next week," Nari reminded him. "They want to implement our design on their moon colonies." "Hard to believe," Jiho said, shaking his head. "A year ago, I was just a guy digging up old ruins. Now we're designing the future of multiple worlds." "You were never just anything," Nari said firmly. "You were always someone who saw possibilities where others saw problems. I just gave you a bigger canvas to work on." Their partnership had become legendary throughout the Velaran system. Other planets were requesting their consultation on everything from urban planning to diplomatic negotiations. Jiho's human perspective helped solve problems that had stumped Velaran minds for generations, while Nari's enhanced intelligence and technological skills brought his ideas to life in ways he never could have imagined. But the success that meant the most to them was much simpler and more personal. The Velaran people had genuinely accepted Jiho as one of their own. Children who had once stared at him with fear now ran up to ask about Earth and human customs. Adults who had whispered about the primitive human now sought his advice on everything. From family problems to business decisions. "Prince Jiho," a voice called from the garden below. They looked down to see young Zara, the daughter of one of the palace gardeners, waving excitedly. "Will you tell us another Earth story at today's lesson?" Jiho had started teaching informal classes about human culture and history. What began as a way to help Velarans understand their new prince had turned into the most popular educational program in the palace. Children and adults alike were fascinated by human resilience and creativity. "Of course," Jiho called back. "Today I'll tell you about a human who couldn't walk but became one of our greatest scientists." "You mean like Princess Nari?" Zara asked innocently. Nari smiled. "Actually, I think he means Stephen Hawking, but thank you for the comparison." As they watched Zara run off to tell her friends about the upcoming story, Jiho felt a gentle movement against his hand, where it rested on Nari's belly. "Their baby was active today. Do you think they'll be more human or more Velaran?" Nari asked, a question they discussed often. "I think there'll be something completely new," Jiho said. "The best of both worlds, with possibilities we can't even imagine yet." "Like us," Nari said softly. "Like us," Jiho agreed. That afternoon, as Jiho told his story to a crowd of fascinated Velarans, he caught sight of Ambassador Talon in the audience. The diplomat who had first welcomed him to Velara now served as an advisor to their joint projects. After the lesson, Talon approached with a familiar expression. "There's been another request," Talon said with a smile. "The Galactic Council wants you and Princess Nari to mediate a dispute between two species who have been at war for 50 years. Jiho looked at Nari, who nodded with excitement. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Next month, after the baby arrives," Talon said. "They specifically requested to wait until your family is complete." As the sun set over their crystal city, Jiho reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them here. What started as an embarrassing cultural misunderstanding had become the greatest adventure of his life. He had found not just love, but purpose, partnership, and a future beyond anything he could have dreamed. Sometimes the best things in life really did come from the most unexpected beginnings.